the 30 days of a month. And that is what chitas is, to say the portion that that corresponds to that day. So, for example, today would be the chapter 119, which is very large. So it's divided into two, and there would be 96 verses of Tehillim. You don't have to remember any of this. Open up your siddur in the back or open up a Tehillim, and you will actually see that there are little notations that tell you first day of the month, second day of the month, 23rd day of the month, etc. So the Hayom Yom says that, so that's Tehillim. The idea of Chumash, we all know that we were brought up as children learning the Chumash. Sadly, some people think that once you finish learning the Chumash in primary school, now you're on to Mishnayos and Talmud, and you just listen to the reading of the Torah on Shabbat because you know the story. But actually, one is supposed to study the portion of the week, and in the Chabad circles, we're very strict about this. So today is Sunday, so we would start from the beginning of Mishpatim and go until Sheni. And then on Monday, it'd be Sheni to Shlishi. And then, of course, we have the Holy Tanya that's also divided into the days of the month, the days of the year, and that's a separate discussion by itself. So now I'm reading the words of the Rebbe. Studying a portion of Chumash with Rashi every day, for example, Sunday until Sheni, Monday until Shlishi, and saying Tehillim every day, and then on Shabbos Marochim, which is once every 4 weeks, to say the whole Tehillim, he says, be scrupulous about all of these. In other words, there's certain times that we do a custom, but if you didn't do it, okay, you didn't do a custom, you didn't break any laws. It's in Yiddish, nish geferlich, it's not so terrible. But chitas, the Chumash and the Tehillim, it is crucial for you, for your children, and for your children's children. So somehow, this idea of saying, especially Tehillim daily, together with the Chumash and Rashi daily, is something which is really crucial. To complete the thought, I want to read a little bit of yesterday's thought. Okay, are you still there? Because I lost you.
No, we hear everything.
Here, okay. And yesterday's thought is from the Tzemach Tzedek, and I'll quote it. If you only knew the power of verses of Tehillim and their effect in the highest heavens, you would recite them constantly. Know that the chapters of Tehillim shatter all barriers. They ascend higher and still higher with no interference. They prostrate themselves in supplication before the Master of all worlds, and they effect and accomplish with kindness and compassion. I don't have to add anything to the words. I don't really understand all of the words, but it's clear. What he's saying is that the words of Tehillim have a direct path to basically to the heavenly chambers, and they seem to break through ordinary barriers. So if there are some, let's say, spiritual impediments which perhaps would interfere or cause static to your prayers or to your desires that you're uttering to Hashem, when you put them in the words of Tehillim, you have to remember Tehillim was composed with divine inspiration by King David, who was, the tzaddik of all tzaddiks. He had no Yetzer Hara. And he's the Mashiach, basically. From him flows Mashiach. That if you say those words, it accomplishes, and it accomplishes with kindness. In other words, instead of that there's a judgment against you, or even if the judgment is for your favor, but occasionally the way this judgment is affected is through severity. However, with words of Tehillim, that Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, assured us that you could accomplish with kindness. There's a very interesting anecdote about the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek's wife was a very holy, righteous woman, but it would seem that her formal education, you have to remember, we're talking about the daughter of a Rebbe who marries the future Rebbe. So she was an extraordinarily holy, saintly woman. Indeed, all of her children became leaders of Israel. But her own formal education was rudimentary. And many times she would say Tehillim. In fact, most of the time, she would always say the book of Psalms without necessarily knowing what each word means. One time she asked her son, one of her sons, she says, I'm always saying the words, how come I don't know them by heart? So the son answered somewhat in jest, Ma, the reason why you can't remember the words by heart is because each time you say them, you make a new mistake. When the father heard about this, he was very upset with his son, and he told his son, you go ask her for forgiveness, and then mentioned, do you know that when I went to St. Petersburg and I needed divine assistance on the level of a miracle, it was your mother's Tehillim that saved me. So the fact that she might have made some mistakes in the pronunciation did not at all interfere with her sincerity and the efficacy of those holy words. So for those of us who read Hebrew with difficulty or find it difficult to say Tehillim, we have to be reminded that when we say Tehillim, repeating the words of David HaMelech, King David, with sincerity, it accomplishes a great deal. I'll just say something nice about my Baba. My Baba, from my father's side, her name was Sarah. She never had a formal education. I think it was the equivalent of I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was the equivalent of the Hebrew schools where they teach you to daven and prepare you for your bat mitzvah. She's very pious, very religious, my grandmother. She used to say Tehillim a whole day. So she actually finished the book usually a little bit more than 2 times, sometimes even 3 times a day. So my first cousin says that by her high school graduation, she graduated, with honors. So when she said, I think she said this in a speech, or maybe she said it later on by the reception, she said, actually, I got the diploma, but it shouldn't go to me, it should go to my grandmother. Why? Every time she had a test, she would say, Baba, zog Tehillim for me. So her Bubby would say to Tehillim that she should be successful in her studies. So she actually believed it, my cousin. She said, I don't think I really deserve the honor. I think it's my grandmother who always prayed that I should get good marks, who essentially should get the diploma. Okay, in any case, so we have today's Yom Yom, which is that we should all say Tehillim daily. And again, it doesn't have to be in Hebrew, it could be in English or Russian or any other language, but the Hebrew words in itself have a certain power and energy that no other language has. Okay, we're hopefully getting to the end, I shouldn't say hopefully, but we're at the end of chapter 7 on page 194. And we were talking about that in Tehillim, which we just mentioned how important it is, in the Hallel, praising Hashem, we say, the dead will not praise you. We praise you, but not the dead. So the Alter Rebbe says, why do we use such a language? I mean, are we trying to poke fun or disparage those that are not living? It's enough to say that we have the honor of praising you. Why do we have to mention we have the honor of praising you, but not the dead? So he explains it's not referring to people that are in a grave. we have the honor, the privilege, the responsibility to praise you, but not those that are dead. And now, my words, the living dead, or the words of the Tanya, not the wicked whose life is a life of death. Why do we call it the wicked, the life of dead? And so perhaps I should do something which is really not Tanya. Let me just mention one interpretation, and then we'll go back to the Tanya's interpretation. Basically, anything physical decays. We all know that. So the most delectable food, if you leave it 2 days out of the refrigerator, you know what it looks like and you know what it smells like. Even iron oxidizes. Everything physical, in one way or another, decays. On the other hand, things which are godly, things which convey Hashem's presence, are very much alive. Not only very much alive, they never decay. They're in a sense eternal. God is, was, and will be. Anything that's receiving that radiance or receiving that effect also is eternal. So now, if the righteous people, especially the righteous of the righteous, in other words, the saints, but to a lesser extent, all of us who are righteous, as it says, all of Israel are tzaddikim. So when we eat, when we drink, when we do parnasa, when we exercise, all of the physical things that we do, if the closer we bring it into holiness, the closer we bring it into a form of serving God who is alive, so then our very life, the eating, the drinking, the sleeping, etc., is all part of a godliness. And as a result, tzaddikim are always alive. In contrast, the wicked, if they're only being nourished by the physical, so then what's really nourishing them are things which are lifeless. Proof of it is just leave it on its own, and you will see where it leads to. In the Tanya's words, there's a much deeper meaning. It's not gashmius, it's not the physicality which is temporary. It's what is giving the gashmius, the physicality, its existence. By definition, nothing can exist without Hashem, period. So everything has a godliness to it. But in terms of Kedusha, the godliness is revealed. So that's what we say in the Tehillim. We say, and we praise you because we are alive. And then there's the physicality, which is kept alive through the godly energy, the way it's flowing through the unclean vessels, which we call the other side. And that's the equivalent of death. Then we learned that in terms of sins, there are the big ones, but there are also a lot of small ones add up to that big one. And of course, the word big and small is relative, but in terms of punishments, or in terms of the direct effect it has on a soul, there are certain sins that it's like getting a knockout punch, and then it's the way of getting a slap. It's uncomfortable, and then it makes you wince, but you continue. So there are the big sins. However, as if I were to use this lousy example again, constant slapping will have the same effect of giving you a concussion as one big knockout punch. And then he says, and he likens it to a thick cloud which blocks out the light, and a lot of small clouds gathering together. Okay. Then, and here we will continue where though we said the words, but we're going to go back. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, approximately 14 lines from the bottom, the last two words. And here he's going to explain that in essence, what we think is a small sin might not be at all, because the sages of blessed memory brought out that there are dimensions of a small sin which actually are the big sin. For example, we all know that you're not allowed to serve an idol. Not only that, a person would be obligated to give up his life, martyrdom, to be a martyr for Hashem, not to bow down to an idol. And if a person, God forbid, is contemplating this sin, he's called blial, like a nefarious person, a terrible Jew. Interesting enough, if a Jew just makes believe he doesn't see someone else's pain, and he overlooks that person for giving him to tzedakah, the very same expression is used. He's a nefarious person. Now, on our own, we never would have equated passing a hungry Jew who's asking us for food with the equivalent of bowing down to an idol. Of course, we would not justify it. We would say that this person has a heart of stone, he's cruel, etc., etc. But what? You're not going to call him up to the Torah because of that? But the sages of blessed memory said, look at the terminology used for such a person. It's exactly the same terminology, the same term that's used for an idolater. So here you are saying, okay, I'm not the dead, I'm not the wicked. I do a little small sins, like for example, I don't give tzedakah. No, maybe actually that's the equivalent of a big one. Or for example, who doesn't enjoy a little gossip? So you're sitting with your friend in the back of the shul by the kiddush, and you're talking about Ruvain or Shoshana and saying things which should not be said. You're in the shul, you just finished davening, you're enjoying the l'chaim, everything is good. No, everything is not good. Telling gossip and speaking bad about a fellow Jew, says the Talmud, has an effect in a manner of speaking as doing all three sins together: idolatry, immorality, and murder. Or if a person blows up, gets angry, or sometimes the expression rightfully so, gets mad. In other words, his mind just simply stops. He's so upset, so angry at this and this, and he actually acts out. It's as if he worshipped an idol, or if he's an arrogant person. So the Rebbe is telling us that it's not only the big sins, not only the repetition of a lot of small sins, not only does it mean the same sin being repeated, but even something which we don't consider a sin can have the equivalent of a bigger sin, which leads us to the realization that our soul has been blemished. We have taken the portion of God and abused it. We've pushed it away from where it's supposed to be. And as a result, the idea of teshuvah means that we have to bring back that last letter, the letter Hey, back to its original source. Okay, 14 lines from the bottom. So to also benimshal, with all of the sins, of that a person, he just steps on them with his heel, and especially not those which he pays no attention to, those which actually the rabbis brought us to their attention, that these activities are not small at all. They're literally like idolatry, immorality, and murder. For example, if God forbid you close your eyes from an act of righteousness, an act of tzedakah, that which is the equivalent of idolatry, as it says, that be careful not to be cruel, be careful not to be um, stingy. Why? Because if you will have in your heart this feeling, and the expression is blial, and that's exactly the same expression is if you're thinking of doing an idol worship. So we see that there's an equation between the two. Or or someone that relates the shame of his friend, which is lashon hara, which is evil talk, and which is the equivalent hashkuluk aveda zara, like idolatry, gilaras v'chazdamim, or he's not guilty of this, but he's guilty of something else. He just gets angry. And last week I explained to you, when you get angry, that means you're putting yourself as if to say that it has to go according to you, as if you created the world and you created the situation, and you're upset that they're not listening or acquiescing to your will, which is idolatrous. Only Hashem is in charge. Someone that has a lot of arrogance, same thing. He's trying to usurp the respect that Hashem deserves. That's what we ended off last week. So we're 2 lines from the bottom. We continue, and when there's a list of what we think are not significant sins, but really are, we have to go back to the fact that God gives us the commandment to study Torah constantly, and no one studies Torah constantly. All of us know stories of heroes study 18 hours a day. Some people study only 2 hours a day, but they never waste time. So they're always constructively using their time. So they're not guilty. But if there's time to be used, it should be used constructively to serve Hashem by and large. That refers to study. And that small sin of not studying is actually the biggest sin of all. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. In fact, there's a statement of the sages, which is really enough to knock you off your perch, where it says that Hashem Vita Kadosh Baruch Hu during the first temple, Hashem would have overlooked the fact that the Jews were serving an idol. He would have forgiven them. However, when they began to disparage the study of Torah or did not show the respect to the study of Torah, then God said, I'm not going to forgive them anymore. So again, here we have, all of us know deep in our marrow that we would never bow down to an idol. And by extension, we would never, God forbid, even contemplate, converting to a different religion, to the extent that we would give up our job and our money, our health, if necessary, our life. And yet, when it comes to other things, which are the equivalent, we just don't pay any attention. As the Gemara tells us about, we're lackadaisical when it comes to using time properly. And again, most primarily directing us to studying the Torah. And that is why there is a prayer to be said before going to bed. Now it's in our Siddur. If you look in the Chabad Siddur, you will find it, but it's under like a asterisk, which means like it's, in a sense, it's optional, but it's printed. So you can look at it when you look at the prayer before going to bed. That's why, because these unimportant sins are truly very significant sins. Therefore, before going to bed, righteous people, they actually say to Hashem, we accept upon ourselves the punishments for the worst sins. You say, how could a person say, I accept upon myself to take the punishment of desecrating the Shabbos, eating not kosher, serving an idol, murdering, when he didn't do any of that? But actually, maybe he did, but in a much more refined way. So because he might know or he might not know, before going to bed, he says, Hashem, I understand my actions were the equivalent of this and this and this, and were there to have been a Sanhedrin, the great court, I would have been punished, and I'm willing to accept it now before going to bed. Milvad api shalpi soid, in addition to the fact that he might have done these sins, which are very severe, there's also the mystical concept, if a person did something which makes I'm not going to talk too much about this, someone that makes a blemish in the letter Yud of the four-lettered name of Hashem, he's actually should get the penalty of stoning. Say, and if you make a blemish in the letter Hey, it's as if you should get the burning penalty. And if you make a blemish in the third letter of Hashem's name, which is a Vav, it's as if you would have been guilty to get and warranted to get beheaded, basically. And were you to have made a blemish in the last hay, you should have received strangulation. So you say, okay, that's pretty heavy stuff, but I didn't do anything. But then he tells you like this: if you just didn't say the Shema, already you've made a cosmic disaster. You made a blemish in the letter Yud. And God forbid if you didn't put on tefillin, utfillin b'is hey. And if you neglected tzitzis, but tzitzis b'is vav. And tefillah, you didn't say the davening properly, b'is hey b'chuli. So it's like, the only word I can say is like, wow. Every single thing that we think is hardly a sin is crucial in terms of destiny. And from just these four examples, a wise person could learn about other sins, and how much more so when it comes to the lack of Torah. Let me end off not with a high, but just another observation. I hope you recall from last week, every word that it says over here, I don't have to tell you, is true because it's being said and taught by the Rebbe who gets it from the source of truth. What I did mention is that this type of introspection, though the Alter Rebbe says it should be done at a significant time daily, on a very practical level in today's day and age, we should you have to do this occasionally, and most of the time you have to be motivated and energetic to do good. And as far as atonement, the biggest atonement is helping another Jew physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially. The idea of helping a fellow Jew is actually the most intense form of teshuvah. So you're returning to God by helping him return to his roots. Okay. But what I wanted to share with you before ending is the very fact that he tells you if you did not say the Shema, you make a blemish in the letter Yud. Now, not that I understand this, but the words, the words are, I use the word powerful. I mean, the words make you shudder. Me, little me, the way I say the Shema has an effect on on the name of God? And the answer is yes. So with all of this, I remember years ago, I saw a cartoon. And in those days, they were telling the parents that you have to be very careful not to destroy the children's ego. So you see a burnt out house, a kid holding a thing of matches, and the parents saying to the child, No, we're not upset that you burnt the house. We're just upset that you used the matches without permission. Yeah, what do you mean? We're not upset that you burnt down the house, only that you used the matches without permission. That's what we're really upset about. So your ego is intact. You're a wonderful child, and we are homeless. Basically, if we were to know that by using matches without permission, we were burning a house, I think we'd be very careful in using matches without permission, right? So you wouldn't just say, all I did was press a button, but if pressing that button starts or ruins a factory production, it's major. It's just a button, but no, it's more than a button. The effect is great. It's massive. So what the Alter Rebbe is telling us in his own way, that as we reflect on the damage, so to speak, or the blemish on the soul from these sins, it should also simultaneously strengthen us that we are very important players in this whole cosmic dance between us and Hashem and creation itself. Everything that we do, and he keeps talking about like the study of Torah. So if we were to spend another 2 minutes a day, another 5 minutes a day studying Torah, he says, so what? So what? And the answer is, it is a big thing. We don't know how big it is, but it's big. It's colossal. And you could see it not only in the positive, but by the negative. God was going to forgive the Jewish people and keep the temple standing, even though they're worshiping idols. Why? Because they would have been studying Torah more earnestly. So everything that we do in terms of spirituality, what we call loosely spirituality, is really, really important and a source of great divine blessing for us, and not only for us, but actually for the entire universe, entire cosmos. Okay, we'll end with this. Have a wonderful day. I'm already reminding you now about Thursday. I'd like to have a Farbrengen in honor of the month of Adar. We'll talk about joy. We could all use a big dose of it. So it's a Zoom Farbrengen. So please put that on your calendar. And if you know someone that might be interested in please let them know this Thursday at 7:30. Okay, wonderful day, everyone. Shalom.
Shalom.